Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Seth, for taking the time today. We are here at our second podcast from TruckX, and really glad to have Seth from Transportation Topics. He's the managing director over there. And we'll talk about transportation today, uh, talking about various changes that has happened over the years and what all new things we see and the current challenges as we face today. So, with that said, good afternoon, Seth.
Yeah,
Thanks
well,
for
thank you
taking the
for having
time.
me on. I appreciate the opportunity, and it's great to speak with you, Tapan. And it's certainly a lot to talk about in trucking transportation these days. Technology has really revolutionized this industry, and I've been covering this industry now at Transport Topics for 10 years now, and it's just amazing when I think about the topics and conversations 10 years ago versus where we are today. It really is amazing how much has changed.
That's great. That's great. Maybe, Seth, it would be great if you could give a quick background. How did you ended up in transportation topics?
Yeah, well, I've graduated from college with a journalism degree, and I'm one of the few that actually managed to stay in that field and use that degree. It's one of those degrees. It's not unlike philosophy or history, where it's fascinating topics, but sometimes are difficult to apply to the real world. But I've been fortunate enough in my career that I've been able to stay in this field. For the last 10 years, I've been in the trade press at Transport Topics, specifically covering the trucking industry, and it's been a great ride. I think that the trucking industry in general is often overlooked and underappreciated by the public at large. It's kind of taken for granted, everything. Perhaps not so much now with all the supply chain issues that we're all facing, and that's we're starting to see some empty shelves here and there in some stores, and maybe the general public is starting to feel that a bit more. And also during the COVID pandemic, there's been greater appreciation for truck drivers, for transportation, for freight transportation in general, because we feel just how important that is. But even when it is operating more in the background, it is a fascinating industry. I say this often, but I've yet to have a boring day at work covering trucking. And part of that is because I cover the technology side of transportation. That's been my primary beat, my primary coverage area for as long as I've been here. And
that's interesting. Yeah.
It's
what have you seen in the last 10 years? Because you cover the tech on the trucking,
right.
and quite a bit has changed, I guess, in the last 10 years since, probably 20 years ago when Qualcomm started with telematics.
Certainly. I guess, with Qualcomm, the first satellite-based communications, just connecting.
Well, that's a long time.
Back office.
Yes.
And that's come so far, right? From just like that basic point of communication to this amazing number of sensors that are on modern vehicles. The modern technology and software that's automating so many processes. We've come so far, and yes, 10 years ago there was conversation about telematics, and your back office fleet management software, your TMS software, of course, has been important for a long time. But I would say in the last 10 years, we've seen adoption level really increase. A lot of that has had to do with the ELD mandate. Of course, virtually every long haul truck now has some form of technology in the cab that the driver is using, some sort of driver interface. That wasn't the case. It used to be more driven by typically the largest fleets, the large companies, as well as some smaller companies that were kind of forward thinking and really investing in technology. But
mainly if you're like more than 100 trucks, then you'll look into the tech.
Yes, exactly. So it was sort of a medium size and up. But now with the ELD mandate, it's everybody. It's owner operators. It's 1, 2, 5, 10 trucks. There's something in the cab to at least automatically record hours of service data. So getting rid of moving beyond the paper logbook. But that's just the beginning, right? That's what's required by the regulation. But once you have a platform in the cab, you can do so much more with that. And we find that, of course, yes, there are some companies that are that want all the bells and whistles and really want to apply a lot of data analytics and automate a lot of processes. But even the small companies, there's so much opportunity just to streamline some basic processes, vehicle inspection reports, going on down the list, fuel
inspection,
tax.
just the basic visibility as well, right? And IFTA calculations and stuff, right? This has been like a small thing, but really big problem for these trucking companies. And we have seen it firsthand from TruckX because, of course, right, when ELD came in, no one liked it and stuff. But I think now people are grown up on it and starting to realize, okay, what other benefits they can get out of the ELD apart from compliance. So yeah, definitely from our side, we have seen this. I would love to know your perspective, right? What has changed in last, let's say, since the ELD mandate came in, where people were forced to do it versus now?
Yeah. And of course, there was certainly resistance in some quarters of the industry to the mandate at the time. But, to your point, there's automating some of the processes saves time for the driver, right? If you don't have to worry about, okay, I got to fill out this logbook, manually, this is all automated now. And it's exact, it's more precise. And frankly, if you were, operating, according to the, if you're following the regulations anyways, you've saved time, for the most part. Now there are, there is pressure around things like truck parking. Truck parking has really risen to a really top of mind issue for truck drivers. It sounds so simple, but it's become such a prevalent problem. As freight demand goes up and see more and more congestion, you see truck stops filling up early in the day, and it's really affecting how drivers plan. Technology, I think, is part of the answer to that. So hopefully they can get closer to their full hours of service, full productivity, not have to stop early for the day and just, well, I know I can park here, I'm just going to knock off for the day early just so I can have a place to park. So it's a shame when we lose productivity, especially when we need so many more drivers to come into the industry. We want the drivers who are here to be as productive as possible so they can, one, have good careers, they can make as much money as possible, and the freight moves as efficiently as possible. And like I said, technology can be part of the answer to that. Finding, okay, how many spaces are available at this stop versus the next one. Have good navigation software. Have good.
So you must be talking to a lot of companies, right? So have you seen anything interesting about solving the parking problem?
Well, and it's a multifaceted issue. Of course, part of that, trucking companies would love to see just more parking areas built, right? Like pave more area, give us more spaces. Some of the truck stops have tried some innovative ways, to reserve a spot. Of course, it's some drivers will do that. Others, kind of balk at it. Do you want to pay to reserve a parking spot or not? So that's an idea. Some states, some areas do actually have signs put up with that information as you're going down the road. But of course, that's kind of an old school approach. Why not have that just available at your fingertips in an app, an application you can just check and as you're planning your day and you're aware of this. That's the next level that I think the industry will get to really across the board. So that's something that we've seen, but it's a tough issue to solve. I think that shippers and consignees being more open to truck drivers parking in their facilities at their facilities would be very helpful. So I think more
it has been a huge problem.
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I live in Northern Virginia, in the greater DC area, and I see where trucks end up parking sometimes. There's a business park, and there's a Kohl's parking lot that has become a de facto truck stop. It's amazing. It's just kind of like there's a lot of extra spaces that aren't really used much by passenger cars, customers going into the store, into the retailer. but you'll see, maybe 10, maybe a dozen trucks parked there at a time. There's a little bit more room there than the Walmart parking lot that's next door. So those, come over and park at Kohl's. Still haven't seen like amenities pop up yet, like something like a food truck or, to serve all the truck drivers who are parking there. But if that's the best place you can find to park, it's kind of a shame, that our transportation system and our shippers, and we haven't found a better way to make drivers comfortable and just, again, where can I park safely?
And I think there are two problems to this. One is parking lots in the city, right? A small city, big city, right? Where there are usually pickups and deliveries. And second is parking spots when they are in transit, right? On the freeways. And these are totally two different problems. And I guess solving the city problem is much harder, I would say, than solving a problem where the truck is. And the truck stops has reduced as well. So I have seen so many truck stops where they have parking, but they have closed all the facilities. And that creates a bigger challenge for truckers because there is nothing in and around.
Just keep it all open and keep the showers clean. Go a long way.
Just going to regular restrooms, right? That's kind of a big challenge.
Right.
And it's interesting that the government or I don't know, someone has to step up to kind of provide these facilities to the truckers.
I mean, life on the road needs to be, as comfortable as possible, especially if we want that next generation of drivers to enter the industry. I mean, it's already a challenge to get, say, millennials and younger to look at this industry as a career path. And it's a shame because there's so many opportunities. But I think that, part of the answer, part of the way to make the job more attractive is just, again, facilities and just comfort on the road. And I think that younger generation is more attuned to technology in the cab, which will help. But that's, one piece of a very big problem that will, require so many different facets and efforts to try to solve.
Yeah, probably it's a good transition to the next, which is very kind of right now happening is the driver shortage, right?
Yeah.
It's a big problem. We hear it from everywhere, right from long haul to middle mile to last mile. So would love to know your thoughts. I mean, I'm sure there are lots of reasons behind it. I have my own opinions, but would love to know your thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah. And, for as long as I've been covering the industry, again, it's been a decade, this has been a core issue for the industry. Recruiting and retention is tough, especially in long haul. Short haul it's still tough, but not as bad. Or like LTLs, again, tough, but not as bad. But long haul over the road trucking, it is really, really hard to get drivers, and it's even worse now. In fact, I think some fleets have told me it's the worst it's ever been. Because there are so many other industries that are also competing for the same labor pool. It's just whether it's service industry or I notice when I go to the airport, it's enough canceled flights this year because the airlines can't get anybody to come back to work. Whether it's pilots or staff, for the airlines, that has thrown travel into disarray. And there's just so many examples across so many industries. So you have all this competition among so many different industries, even outside of trucking, that's all pulling at it. And of course, you have this infrastructure bill that just went through. So down the line, we're going to see more construction projects. Construction traditionally is a field, of course, that pulls from some of the same background, some of the same potential truck drivers who instead go into construction. There's a lot of good money, a lot of good opportunities in the construction field. So it's going to be tough. It's really tough right now, and I'm sure it's going to remain that way. And there are a number of things that the industry is trying, but like I said, it's going to have to be a multi-pronged approach to try to solve this. Really, it's almost an existential problem for the industry. Like where do we find our future workforce? And so many drivers who are older, nearing retirement age. And at the same time, freight demand is just going up. There's so much business now in trucking. The economy did bounce back sharply from the depths of the pandemic, but it's been harder to get the workforce ramped up to meet that demand, and transportation's really the prime example of that. So
I
therein
think
lies
during
the
the
challenge.
pandemic, a lot of these older generation people have kind of checked out as well from long haul trucking, saying, okay, I'm done, probably find some local gig or take some retirement.
Early,
Retire early. Yeah.
And it's a shame, but it's going to become more and more urgent for the industry to find ways to appeal to that new generation of truck drivers, and whether it's younger people or people who are on a second or third career looking for something new, a new way of life, a new career path, that can be really lucrative. I mean, you can make good money in trucking. If you're a blue collar worker and you're a safe driver and you want to build a career, it's a great opportunity. But
it's a more consistent job, I guess. So one of the reasons I think, let's say, for example, construction versus trucking. In construction, your job could be transitional. So you work for a few months and then kind of you can be moved out or try to find another project. But in trucking, at least if you go start your career, people can have a proper career wherein you constantly get new jobs and you can keep rolling, keep moving the wheel. But I think this whole supply chain shortage, that has contributed to it even further, because now people cannot buy new trucks.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so you need the driver to drive the truck, and you also need the truck. And of course, we hear that from the truck manufacturers. It's not just a passenger car issue; it's also the truck makers and the trailer makers too. They're dealing with the same issues. And yes, we hear about semiconductors a lot, but there are other components that they're raw materials. At times, there have been shortages, and that's made it really tough. And that's there's always some level of lead time. If you're a fleet and you're ordering new equipment, you're ordering it for delivery at a certain time, but that calendar's been extended out a bit, and in some cases, renegotiation over prices because of how tough it is, and it's tough for the manufacturers to get what they need from their suppliers. It's tough for the suppliers to get whatever they need, whether it's raw materials or the components. So the whole thing has been a challenge on the equipment side. And that's one piece of it. And then you need the driver as well to actually operate the truck.
Like the trailer pricing have gone to like a used truck pricing pretty much. It's you have to pay like 50,000 grand for a trailer, which is ridiculous.
It's tough out there. But a lot of demand, and that's a sign of all the freight that needs to be hauled. But the whole industry is trying to keep up with that and kind of get ramped back up. It's mostly a labor issue.
Do you think the helicopter money also helped in this kind of shortage of driver?
Yeah, there's a lot of components to the problem. It makes me just wonder. There's a lot of speculation about how long the supply chain issues are going to continue, and I don't think anybody really has a great answer to that. But chances are that this lingers into next year at least. But hopefully things will start to shake out, start to settle down, and we'll approach something resembling normalcy soon.
Yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. And so what do you think will help trucking companies, increase their efficiencies and stuff, right? So I think we talked about ELD, which definitely was enforced by compliance, but then there are other efficiencies that was brought by the ELD. Let's call it IoT devices, right? There are a few other things, which is safety, which is also getting very necessary these days, especially with accidents and lawsuits that happen on the road.
Yeah, and we've really seen that in insurance costs. Insurance rates for the industry are really skyrocketing. It can be difficult to get insurance sometimes in some portions of the industry, and a lot of that's driven by some of the nuclear verdicts we've seen. Like these really high, top dollar settlements or jury awards in some of these in some high profile cases. And it's, that's really, it doesn't affect just the company that's involved in an accident. It really inflates the whole insurance market. It just, the risk, the liability risk is perceived to be that much higher that insurance rates really just keep climbing. And, it's tough. And, really it becomes that much more important for trucking companies. And trucking companies, the best trucking companies, of course, are always laser focused on safety. I mean, that's the number one priority. And I hear that, from the fleet managers that I talk to, that is number one and always has been and always will be. And it's the equipment, it's the driver. And I think that one of the efficiencies and one of the ways that technology helps there is with telematics and driver coaching. It's keeping close tabs on driver performance, and in cases where a driver is not performing that well, or there's a lot of hard braking incidents, perhaps catching some speeding cases, addressing that directly with the driver before it becomes a problem. So more proactive stance on safety, not just responding to an incident, but trying to really prevent it from ever happening. That's been kind of a shift in the industry stance. And again, not just, that's something that fleets of all sizes can do, carriers of all sizes can do. There's even some pretty sophisticated ways of looking at driver scorecards and maybe applying some machine learning to understand, okay, we're really pulling in a lot of data on, vehicle metrics, on driver metrics, driver performance metrics. What does this tell us about that driver's risk profile? And identifying, okay, who are, say, the 10% riskiest drivers who, this is where we really should put our time and effort in for training. So we are really addressing the weakest link in the chain on safety. That's been a big part of it. And we're seeing active safety technologies, advanced driver assist technologies to help the driver. Adoption has gone up. I remember, say 5-10 years ago, of course, collision mitigation technology was on the market, available, some level of, automatic emergency braking, to help prevent rear-end collisions. But that's starting to really become widely adopted and accepted in the industry. It's still a minority of trucks that are out there total, on the road, but I hear anecdotally, at least, that we're from the suppliers that we're kind of at that 50% range of new trucks that are ordered have that kind of driver assist technology to help the driver. And that actually becomes even more important as, we look at that in conjunction with the workforce issue, right? I mean, we have to bring in that new set of drivers who maybe aren't as experienced, and they could use the support. They need, any driver, right? Even the best drivers, can be an even better driver.
Reduces the stress, right, for them as well.
Yeah, and it's reducing strain, exactly. Reducing the stress. Adaptive cruise control is something that maybe we kind of take for granted and doesn't sound that exciting, but if you're out in the truck for 11 hours,
driving for 8 hours, big straight on highway,
big difference. So those are things that are becoming, again, they've been available for a while, but they're becoming more widely accepted, and I think we'll continue to see that. There's some rumblings that it's possible that the federal government may eventually mandate AEB, automatic emergency braking technology, similar to what we've seen with rollover stability, anti-lock braking. Europe has already gone in that direction, so it's possible that we may see that here. But at least for now, it's something that fleets are looking at as a market option, and more of them are checking the box when they're speccing a truck. Yes, okay, safety technology to help our drivers.
And it also helps them promote to a potential recruit, right? So if they're trying to recruit a new driver or retain a driver, providing them good equipment is always beneficial.
Oh, yeah, exactly, because you don't want to be stuck on the side of the road. That's bad for the fleet. It's bad for the shipper. It's bad for the driver. The last thing the driver wants to be is stuck on the side of a road somewhere, not making money. And that's really important for driver retention.
Any other things have you seen for driver retention?
Yeah, we've seen driver pay increases,
Of course.
really across the board in the industry. And I guess when the labor shortage is what it is, there's kind of almost an arms race among many of the companies to offer, not just pay increases, but also sign-on bonuses,
Sign on.
incentives. One of the more interesting approaches I think that ties in well with safety is the performance-based bonuses. Performance-based pay, where we've applied this technology. We have driver scorecards. We're tracking how well you do, and that's hopefully when done well. That's also accounting for things like traffic congestion. Like, your miles per gallon weren't as good this day because you were stuck in traffic in maybe the greater Atlanta area, or up here by the DC area where that's likely to happen. So you should not be judged, based on traffic conditions. You should be judged based on your performance as a driver. So miles per gallon, of course, so fuel economy, but also safety performance, of course. And you know what? If you're safe, if you're efficient, we can reward you as a driver. We're going to all that money we save in fuel, that money we save in liability protection. We're going to give a good chunk of that back to the driver in the form of pay and reward those drivers. To me, I think is a great way to address at least a small way, some of those core issues at the same time.
No, makes sense. And then talking about technology, right? So I think one is something which is inside the cab. We talked about ELD, we talked about cameras. What other technologies you see these days where companies are using on their, like for a dispatcher, right? Or for a fleet manager, like a TMS system?
Yeah, there's so much in the back office too, of course. And what we're seeing more and more, and that's for fleet operators, for dispatchers, is also for 3PLs, for freight brokers. More and more automation, business process automation. So less time doing repetitive tasks. You think of the broker example, that's, phone call, to, find a truck for a load, for a shipment. And, that manual process is gradually giving way to more automation. That's, load boards that are digitized, that's digital transactions. And we see a lot of the larger and even in medium-sized freight brokers are moving in that direction. And of course, most of the large fleets are also freight brokers themselves. They have a freight brokerage arm, but more intelligence on those decisions, but also just kind of replacing and automating the not, mindless, but just like kind of the basic repetitive tasks. And that frees up people. It's not replacing people. It's supporting people so they can focus on what people are really good at. Right? Yeah. So it's complementing and it's changing the nature sometimes of these jobs. So it's more, now this broker or this dispatcher now has more time to focus on solving problems. It's transportation. There's always going to be problems. Something unforeseen will happen. There will be a storm. There will be an accident that changes your route. There will be some sort of delay that's unforeseen. Maybe your shipper, the consignee, something has gone, something's amiss, and you have to change your plans, and you need to respond to it and solve the problem. So you can focus on customer service. You can focus, as a dispatcher or as a broker to solve the problems rather than pounding the phones or doing something else that's quite repetitive. Manual data entry. That can be automated and shared across, multiple systems. Part of the problem is, of course, with the proliferation of all this technology, you have all these applications in the back office, you have all these devices in the cab, all collecting data. Hopefully you don't have somebody in the back office who's taking all this information, entering it 15 times in 15 different places, and oops, typo. That can all be automated and that can be integrated. And putting all these pieces together for a more comprehensive fleet management platform is the path forward. I think when we have so many pieces that have to be managed.
And it's interesting to see, right? We think that all of this could be automated already, but it's way too
It's
far
tough,
away from
right?
the
And
truth.
there are
It's
so
like,
many different technology vendors, so many different
mhm,
companies. Trucking is so fragmented. So much of the work is
yeah,
done by small and medium-sized companies. It's not like parcel where it's FedEx and UPS and the postal
mhm,
service are the vast majority. It's trucking. Most of the work is done by those medium and small size companies that don't always have like massive budgets to invest in technology to automate everything. But there are a lot of vendors, technology developers, both companies that have been in the industry for decades, as well as many new companies that came in recent years. So fresh ideas, fresh energy, and fresh funding, finding ways to solve some of these longstanding issues.
yeah.
But yeah, it's not that easy to do when you have so many
There are
companies.
these big companies that are stuck on the green screen still, right? So
That's still
yeah,
out
I
there.
always wonder, yeah, it's still out there. It would ever go away or not? It's fascinating. And I was talking to someone at ATA show a few weeks back at Nashville, where you were there as well. So I was talking to this trucking company, and he's like, "I love my green screen. I mean, it always works, and the way he was talking about it, I don't think so. He's going to move away from it for a while." And
Well, I don't know if you have to sell it to a new driver,
mhm,
say like a younger driver you're going to onboard, they're going to want something newer than that. I think, they're not going to want to work with that.
yeah,
But there's definitely kind of an old school component, technology that perhaps has outlived its life that's still out in the field for a very long time. Part of that's going to be solved with the 3G sunset. I think, some of these older devices are just not going to be an
it's
option
not going to
anymore.
work. Yeah.
And there are, some companies that are still planning, hopefully
Mhm.
planning rather than scrambling, but before long, it's going to be scrambling to replace older
On
devices
the
that
3G.
are not going to be reliable anymore. You got to move to 4G.
So on this topic of 3G sunset, do you think it's going to be pushed out for a bit, or?
We'll see. I don't have a crystal ball on that, but
Mhm,
I think that it becomes more and more urgent every day
mhm.
that companies that are still using 3G, to move
Yeah,
on to the newer technology platform. I mean, we're talking about 5G. I mean,
yeah,
now granted, in trucking, for business purposes, that's still a bit on the horizon.
mhm,
The industry standard now that we're moving into is 4G.
yeah.
But still, I mean, I think if not for the sunset, I mean, at least just to operate more efficiently, it makes sense to do this from a business standpoint, regardless
Yeah.
of what's happening. You want to take advantage of more modern technology. You want to be on, even like the computer you use in the office or at home. You want to have a more modern operating system. You don't want to be on, Windows Vista in 2021, right?
Oh yeah. I was talking to you the other before our call, right? So I just got my new MacBook.
Yeah.
So just opened
Right.
it
Yeah.
up,
You
and
got to
it's like,
upgrade, right? The
yes,
time
you
comes.
have to upgrade. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that the replacement cycles for trucking technology in some cases probably should be shorter. I think that,
Yeah.
and again, it's the nature of smaller businesses sometimes where those investments are, uh, the life cycle is perhaps a bit longer than it really should be. But
And I think partly because many of these old TMS systems I've seen, they are non-cloud based. So
right,
it's
that's a
an old
transition.
way of, and that's really hard to transition out because
Yes.
you are running your own machines and
Yep.
like maybe your data center and stuff. And so it's totally different process versus having some system which is cloud based, which
Yes.
constantly updates itself.
Yeah,
So
and that is where it will go, I think, and it's starting to happen. Some of the companies that, of course, have invested heavily, many years ago, decades ago, into a TMS system. There's like on premises. It takes
yeah,
time to migrate all that, and it's not easy when you're running a business day to day to go through that, but naturally that is the direction that we'll see over time.
that's one of the also reasons is there are so many moving pieces in trucking that people are always busy fighting the day-to-day challenges. And when you tell them, hey, you have to upgrade your system, that's like a new problem which they don't want to think about, because whatever is there, it's kind of working. But
and that's a tough hardware problem, like on the vehicles too. I mean, because if you've got trailers, you've got trucks all over the country, and you want to swap out maybe your trailer tracking device or your in-cab unit or your telematics or whatever it may be, onboard video. You have to touch a lot of vehicles that are in a lot of different geographic locations sometimes. So that's not that easy, and that's part of the issue also with this 3G sunset. I mean, well, if you want to upgrade, it's not, you don't do that overnight. You're planning a process.
It takes a lot of time, and all on top of that, there is the supply chain issues for like chip shortage.
You actually have to get
for vendors like us. I mean, you cannot just call and say, "Hey, ship me 1,000 devices today," right? It's just not going to happen because everyone is running short on these devices. That's another challenge which I think the trucking companies are not realizing, that if they start asking their vendor, whoever vendor they're working with, at the last minute, most likely they're not going to be able to support them. And it's not like they don't want new business; they just cannot. I mean,
that's often the I guess when any sort of change or disruption in the industry, the further you plan ahead, the better. And that was certainly the case with ELD.
Oh God!
I remember the company that was successful planned for that.
You won't believe we had customers
right at
the end.
Like
we had customers who
the next day. Hey, got any ELD for me? So tell me, how much of that did you see? How much of that did you see? Like when the mandate went into effect, like all the companies just coming out of the woodwork. Hey, we need an ELD. Last minute.
It was bad. It was really bad. Like for us, we had like people lined up outside our office, like physically. Anytime you go, right, physically, there are like 30 people lined up, and there are people who showed up. So we are in Mountain View in the Bay Area. We had people. I still remember one person who was waiting outside, and we were constantly on the phones and stuff. Everyone was busy. No one knew that there was a line outside. And then once I visited them, there was this one guy who was standing there for like an hour, and he drove all the way from LA to pick up a device because they want to start driving tomorrow. And that's a huge. People just wait for the last minute, and it doesn't go that well then.
That's crazy.
Hope that doesn't happen the same for 3G sunset, but we'll see.
So, if you're still on 3G, now's the time. Don't wait until the last minute. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. No, that's great. And maybe another topic which we were talking about was automation on truck itself, right? So which is autonomous trucks. And so we have seen few companies going public. There are lots of companies who are running trials. What have you seen in the market?
This is a really fascinating space. Of course, I think it's also captured the imagination of people outside the industry, I think, and sometimes that leads to some faulty assumptions about what this means for driver jobs. I think that again, as we described earlier, the reality is like we're just desperate to bring in people. We're trying to expand our workforce, not replace it. And when you talk to the developers who are working on this technology, that's how they see it too. Even the companies that truly want to get to that level 4 automation with the driver out, is designed for a specific application, right? This is not level 5 where it's an unmanned vehicle that's going to go everywhere that a manned vehicle would go. That's just not what they're trying to do right now. They're trying to find places, shipping lanes where, okay, maybe from this depot to that depot on this stretch of highway in this particular geographic area in the near term, perhaps we can fully automate that. But we still need drivers on the front end and the back end of that. And what happens though, potentially in theory, is those drivers' jobs become more regional in nature. They become shorter haul. Chances are they are home at night, and the driver's lifestyle improves. So that's one of the business cases, the business models for autonomous trucks that I think has some promise. More sort of a hub system or a relay system. But really it's going to be something you can almost think of it as a new mode of transportation. You have truck, you have rail, you have autonomous truck, and in certain cases, in certain ways, perhaps autonomous trucks will make sense. It's not going to be everything. It can potentially, I think, help to bridge that gap of the driver shortage. I don't think that it'll even do that anytime soon. So if you're out there, if you're 21, if you're getting your CDL, you want to be a career truck driver, you will have a job through your whole career. I have no problem saying that definitively. I don't have that crystal ball, but I think that you will have a long career in trucking. Your job will not be automated away. It may change, and hopefully for the better, through the use of automation, through the use of technology. And maybe you're working with autonomous trucks in some ways, but you'll have a job. The industry needs it so much, needs people so much, and automation is part of the answer, in terms of helping to solve that labor gap, perhaps, but also just making the job better for the people who are in the industry, making the job more efficient, improving efficiency in the whole freight ecosystem. And the companies that are in this now have made a lot of progress. You mentioned the companies that have gone public. There's some very well-funded companies working on this, of course, big names. And in some ways, the freight transportation, the trucking business case may be more attractive than robotaxi in some cases. Some of the companies see that as, maybe trucking first before passenger car. And you think about, the types of routes that a long haul truck might be on, long stretches of open highway, that may be easier to automate than, say,
city driving.
City driving, robotaxi in an urban area with cross traffic and pedestrians, and that's a very complex environment. Even though you're at higher speeds on the highway, it's a simpler driving environment. So of course we'll have lots of development of driver assist technology that will become more and more advanced. We're starting to see the very beginning of steering assistance. Of course, passenger cars now have, lane keep assist. And we have like the very beginnings of that in trucking, mostly to reduce the strain and also help. And so if there's high crosswinds or conditions like that, there's some torque at the wheel to help the driver. So we see the very beginnings of that in trucking now. It's on the market, but that'll inevitably expand. And it is fascinating to see also the fully autonomous truck developers who are now, it's not just theory, it's actually in operation, is mostly in the Southwest, hauling real.
We were at the ATA, right? There were two trucking companies over there, I think.
Right, yeah. Plus
Too Simple was inside and Plus was outside.
Yep.
Plus was actually giving rides to people. So.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one of my colleagues did the demo. He drew the long straw. I kind of wanted to do it too, but he was able to do that, and I was busy with another assignment. But we had a write up in Transport Topics from that experience on site, and I've done ride-alongs before with some of these companies and developers, and it's amazing how far it's come. And big names in trucking are partnering with these companies to learn about it, to really learn, okay, how can this work in our operations? So there's a lot of interest from big names in trucking on what is the right way to potentially deploy this technology. When the regulation is there, when assuming the path is clear, and a lot of these states, are quite receptive to the technology, for a number of reasons. I think that, for one, there is potential for safety improvement.
Safety is a big concern, right? That's like a 60,000, 80,000 pounds.
Yeah. Safety is there's opportunity. And if it proves itself out, if autonomous trucks can prove that they, on average, are very safe, then, that can have a lot of benefits there. But of course, there's also efficiency and, the states.
That's one of the things, I guess.
The job. They want to attract investment. They want to attract, hey, this new company that's going public might, start a facility in my state. So some of the states are kind of eager to attract that. You see that in some of the Rust Belt states as well. I grew up in Ohio and had traditional automotive, background and investment. Don't want to see that all go to the Bay Area and California and Texas and Arizona. Hey, to bring some of that here too. So I think that states like Ohio and Michigan are also interested in automation as well.
And it's very challenging with autonomous trucks, right? So like we humans are kind of okay forgiving another human, right, running into an accident. But if a machine runs into an accident, that's like a big thing. So even if we say that, okay, the ratio of humans running into accident versus a machine running into accident is like 1:100, but still like just one accident and the whole thing kind of goes back to zero.
Yeah, and it's
so that with Lyft.
Yeah,
not Lyft. Uber.
Uber. Yes, the public acceptance is very important, and that ultimately will be reflected by legislation and the regulators. Their stances will be determined by the motoring public. What do people really think? In some cases, I think that will trickle up. It will go up, to the government levels how it's treated. So it is important that for this to succeed, it's going to have acceptance from not just the industry and not just regulatory agencies, but also from the motoring public. And it's not enough just for the numbers to prove that it's safe. Also, people have to be comfortable with it, and that is the challenge. One accident can set the whole thing back years. So it's incumbent on everybody who's developing the technology, of course, to always do it safely. And we'll see how it all plays out with, again, I think people are becoming more comfortable with automation. They're starting to experience some of these technologies in their own vehicles, their own personal cars. In some cases, like, okay, hey, my car has automatic emergency braking, and I want to make sure that my teenager, my 16-year-old who's learning to drive, has this technology to help them drive safely. So some of those experiences, I think, will change perceptions. You'll still have those who are just, kind of fear of the unknown, fear of automation, whether it's rational or not.
It needs like a generational change, I guess, for these kind of technologies to be accepted.
And of course, the challenge with any autonomous vehicles, it'll be surrounded also by vehicles that are not autonomous. They have to deal with what drivers.
That's the biggest problem, actually.
Right.
If we were not on the roads and driving ourselves.
The problem that drivers have, they have to deal with all the drivers, the passenger cars who are, they're on their phones, not paying attention. They're distracted. You have drunk drivers. You have just aggressive drivers. So, autonomous vehicles have to deal with all that too. So chances are when there's an accident, it's because, a passenger car ran into an autonomous truck. That's what drivers deal with, unfortunately, as well. They have to deal with daredevils out on the road every day, and they have to be mind readers, right? They have to what is this person going to do? Are they going to cut me off? Are they going to do something stupid? And unfortunately, the answer too often is yes, they are. And that also makes the job of the driver more difficult. There's not a whole lot that the industry can, as a whole, the trucking industry can do about that, but perhaps more appearances at driver ed schools, I don't know, maybe can get the motoring public to be a little bit more respectful and cognizant of heavy duty trucks that cannot stop on a dime, even though sometimes people treat them like they can.
Yeah. And I think, so this is interesting. And maybe one last topic, which is kind of on my mind as well, is electrification. So I think we have seen like cars, passenger, now pickup trucks as well, right? Coming in. So Rivian went IPO today for pickup electric truck. And Tesla is trying to do electric trucks, big semi trucks. I've seen actually here on the road a few years back, the semis, the big ones.
The one that I saw was at the launch event back in, I'm going to say, that's been a few years ago. During the unveil. That was in LA, actually. But yeah, and Tesla, of course, but also all of the incumbent truck manufacturers are investing in this. They've all introduced.
Freightliner has introduced their
battery electric models, and there's investment also in hydrogen fuel cell. which is really a kind of a range extender for battery electric. It's an electric truck with a fuel cell as well. But
I think the biggest challenge for big trucks is charging, right? How fast can you recharge the truck so that it can be on the road again? And
in the near
that's
term,
where I guess hydrogen is kind of
exactly
has some more,
that's the
has
leading
some more
contender.
leading contender, yeah.
For long haul, longer distances. That's how you can potentially get to zero emissions there. Of course, renewable natural gas, I think is also attracting attention. As the natural gas segment of the industry has been shifting toward renewable natural gas because of the sustainability benefits potential. And but yeah, to your point, battery electric, in the near term is mostly short haul. It's local distribution. It's some vocational applications like refuse trucks. Make sense to potentially to go electric. But also like port drayage is a good one. All those trucks that are moving all those containers out of the port of
back and forth,
LA and on Long Beach, some of those could be electric. In fact, the Port Authority in California, of course, are pushing in that direction. Some other parts of the country are looking at that as well, of course. But battery electric, it's a whole different animal. It's a whole different type of vehicle. There's no internal combustion engine. You no longer are using a network of diesel fueling stations all over the country. You're now relying in the beginning mostly on your own terminal, charging at your facility, maybe charging at a shipper's facility, and that's what's available. You're probably running repetitive routes, short haul routes, and charging back at home at the terminal. But then you need to plan. You don't only need to install the charging infrastructure, the charging station at your facility. You also need to plan when the vehicle charges, how the vehicle charges, because that can have a big effect on the cost. If you're charging during peak hours or not, how fast you're charging, your peak demand, that can have a huge effect on the actual cost of the electricity. And the ROI, like the bottom line, really depends on carefully planning how the vehicle charges. And there are some companies that are basically, the companies right now are trucking companies are dabbling with this, right? There's a small but growing number of companies that have ordered their first few of these vehicles, and they're testing them, and some cases they're buying them. They're out in the market and they're available for purchase now, and we're seeing the very, very beginnings of this whole new segment of the industry that's just starting to grow.
Yeah, I think these electric vehicles will be more popular in like middle mile and last mile kind of deliveries than the long haul. Exactly opposite of the autonomous vehicles. And one of the good reasons, I guess, is the range and also the torque, since you can get like instant acceleration in electric. I mean, it's really good for like
fun, right?
stop and go kind of a traffic and like
regenerative braking,
last mile.
It makes that's the perfect application for it. And I will say that the developers, like the manufacturers, are generally trying to make their electric trucks feel like diesel trucks. Right. So it's not quite like getting into a Tesla passenger car and, okay, let's just how fast can we accelerate and have like a G-force event, kick back into your seat.
But Tesla still says, I guess, 0 to 60 in less than 10 seconds, right? For the truck.
Yeah, right. Well, which sounds cool, I guess, and I guess if you're an investor, but if you're a fleet manager, you're like,
now you have to strap your load.
Kind of operate more like a diesel. But it is cool technology. It's amazing, what the battery electric vehicle can do, and you don't have a torque problem with you don't have to worry about, okay, is this going to be able to haul the load? Yeah, it can. The EV, that's not the issue. It's battery. It's the cost, for how much battery you want to put on it for whatever the range you want it to be. And charging infrastructure and charging management and cost, and of course the vehicle itself right now is significantly more expensive than a diesel truck. So I think that the early days
maintenance cost is quite low though, so that's a huge advantage of trucking.
That's something that I've been watching very closely. because I think that there is a lot of opportunity for easier maintenance, lower maintenance costs. Because I mean, you get rid of all the diesel after treatment, all the emission systems that are on a modern diesel truck. You've got your selective catalytic reduction, you've got your EGR, you've got all this stuff. Your
hundreds of things to worry
particulate
about
filter.
on a day-to-day basis.
And if anything goes wrong with that, then you've got a maintenance headache.
Yeah.
And those are, they've gotten much, much better, as those systems have matured over time. They're more reliable, but still, that's that is a top maintenance item and a top reason for downtime for a commercial vehicle. So if the industry, fewer moving parts on an electric truck. So if the industry can benefit on the maintenance side, that can help offset some of the added costs on the front end. So I'm eager to see how the vehicles really perform over the span of many years out in the field. We probably won't have the full answer to that for some years. And I also think that the vehicles will get better. I mean, this is still pretty new for the manufacturers. They're going to learn, and the fleets are going to learn. So, I mean, what we have right now are the worst electric trucks that will ever be built, and they're only going to get better. And I think that there will be some pretty big gains pretty quickly too.
Yeah, technology has their own evolution, so it takes time. So, well, that being said, thanks a lot, Seth, for taking the time today. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I know we just went over different topics, but I think that was the whole goal, right? To talk about how technology is really changing trucking and transportation. And really glad to have you on here, and thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you, Tapan. I really appreciate it. Great conversation. Probably could have gone another hour if we wanted to, but we all have our attention spans and other things to get to. Great conversation. I appreciated it, and always it's fun, to be on others' podcasts. As the host of my own on Transport Topics, of course, has a podcast known as Road Signs. It's available on all the usual channels, but I'm usually sitting in that the host seat, so it is fun to be sitting in the guest seat for a change.
I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. So, but thanks for the conversation, and thanks for having me on. Appreciate the invite.
Thanks. Have a good one.
You too.